This happened in early 2019, deep in the Appalachian foothills of North Carolina, back when I was 40 years old and working as a remote contractor. On paper, I had freedom, no boss hovering, no commute, but in reality, I was drowning in deadlines. My sleep schedule was wrecked. Nights blurred into mornings. I'd convinced myself I was choosing to work at odd hours, when really, I just didn't know how to shut my brain off anymore. So I planned a solo hike, nothing extreme, just a loop trail I'd done before for maybe 5 hours max. I didn't want adventure. I wanted silence. I wanted my body exhausted enough that my thoughts would finally go quiet. A few nights before the hike, I made a mistake. I fell into one of those forgotten corners of the internet old hiking forums that look abandoned but still quietly breathe. Yellowed posts, broken image links, usernames that hadn't been active in years. In one thread, buried deep, someone mentioned a shortcut on the loop I planned to hike. Supposedly shaved off nearly an hour. The post said it was a local trick. Look for the ribbon. Look for stacked stones. You'll know. That should have been my warning. The trail started off perfectly normal. Damp soil, pine and leaf rot in the air. That clean, earthy smell you only get after winter starts loosening its grip. I still had phone service. I remember feeling oddly proud of myself for being out there alone, setting my own pace, finally unplugged. About an hour and a half in, the main trail curved uphill. That's when I saw it. Off to the right, barely noticeable, unless you were looking an extremely narrow track cutting away from the trail. Too narrow to be official, but worn, used, intentional. And there it was. A sun-faded ribbon tied loosely to a low branch. A crude arrow carved into bark. A small stack of stones carefully placed, not random, exactly like the post described. I stood there longer than I should have, arguing with myself. You're overthinking. It's daylight. You wanted quiet, not paranoia. So I stepped off the trail. The change was immediate. The ground dropped faster than any shortcut should. The trees pressed in. Loose gravel replaced packed dirt. The air felt colder, wetter. Within minutes, the path dissolved into slick stone. And then suddenly, I was walking inside a narrow ravine, rock walls, rising on both sides, steep and close. That's when I smelled it. At first, it was just wrongness in the air. Sharp, dry, then it clicked. Cigarette smoke. Not wood smoke, not a campfire. Cigarettes have a papery chemical, bite something that does not belong in damp stone and moss. I stopped. Hello, I called out. Nothing. I took a few steps. The smell faded, then came back, then moved again. I told myself someone must have passed through earlier. Then I saw it. A cigarette butt resting on a flat rock near the ravine wall, tucked into a shallow dip, almost intentionally. Damp, but not old. The paper still, yellow, not ash gray. Recent. I nudged it with a leaf, feeling stupid, like I was gathering evidence for a court that didn't exist. I pulled out my phone. No service. Stopping felt worse than moving, so I kept going. The ravine narrowed. The walls crept closer. Even careful steps sent gravel sliding under my boots. That's when I noticed the scrape marks, repeated scuffs along the rock wall at about shoulder height. Same spot, again and again. I tried to rationalize it. Backpacks, gear, hikers, squeezing through. But there were no clear footprints ahead of me. No exit visible. The ravine dipped and ended at a steep stone spillway, smooth rock rising sharply upward. Climbable maybe, but slick. One mistake and you'd slide straight back down. I stopped and listened. A pebble clicked behind me. Just one. I hadn't moved. I turned my phone flashlight on and glanced back. High on the right wall, I saw an outline. A full person, but something human-shaped, like a knee or shoulder tucked behind stone. Then it was gone. I turned around. Going back up was worse. The slope felt steeper. Loose rock slid under my boots. I slipped, slammed my hands into damp stone, felt skin tear open. Warm sting blood. Didn't matter. The cigarette smell came back stronger this time, then vanished. Then returned again, like something circling. I spotted a narrow side cut in the rock. Barely a path. More like a flaw in the stone. I didn't climb it. I scraped my way up. Grabbed roots that might have been dead. Hauled myself inch by inch. My knee cracked into stone. My hands burned. I reached a narrow shelf and crouched behind a boulder, gasping. For a moment, there was only wind and my breathing. Then, a lighter flicked. Once. Silence. No voice, no footsteps. Just the sound getting swallowed by stone. I didn't wait. I scrambled along the shelf, clawed upward, slipped, crawled, bled. It took longer than I'll admit. When I finally burst back onto the main trail, it felt unreal, like stepping through a hidden door. Other hikers were there, laughing. Normal? I smiled like I was fine and walked past them. I sat in my car for a long time before driving, hands on the wheel, breathing slow, processing the fact that I'd walked into something I didn't understand. Weeks later, I noticed red clay still packed into the seams of my boots from the ravine. I could have cleaned it. I didn't. It's still there, thin rust-colored line I won't scrub out, because I don't think I took a shortcut. I think I followed something that was left there on purpose. This took place in 2016, back when I was 19 and a first-year engineering student who genuinely believed that watching gear reviews online somehow counted as real outdoor experience. It didn't, not even close. There were 3 of us, Caleb, and our friend Joanne. We decided it was time to do our first real backpacking trip. Nothing extreme. Just enough distance into the San Juan Mountains to feel like we'd accomplished something worth talking about later. Our gear situation was optimistic at best. Everything was cheap, mismatched, and bought with confidence we hadn't earned. My sleeping bag claimed it was rated for cold weather. It absolutely was not. Joe brought a camping stove that worked perfectly fine at home, but the moment we hit altitude, it decided it was done participating. And Caleb, full of confidence, insisted we didn't need bear spray because, in his words, we're loud. We set up camp right near the edge of the tree line in a small clearing. It wasn't an official campsite, but it felt safe enough. Flat ground, an old fire ring, trees thick behind us to block the wind. It had that feeling of a place other people had used before, which somehow made it feel approved. We cooked ramen, oversalted it, and sat around talking about nothing important. Phones were already dying from photos and downloaded music. Caleb played one last song until his battery dropped into the red, then shut it off with a shrug. By midnight, the fire had burned down to dull embers. That's when the mountains went quiet. Not peaceful, quiet, empty quiet. The kind that makes you suddenly aware of how loud normal life is. Even our voices sounded wrong, too sharp against the stillness. At some point, the conversation just stopped. Not intentionally. Just one of those pauses where no one has anything ready to say. And right then, we heard footsteps. Joe straightened immediately. Caleb stayed sitting, but I noticed his confidence didn't quite reach his eyes. Probably an elk, Caleb said out loud. The footsteps stopped. Like whatever it was had paused to listen. Caleb waited a second and then called out, "Hello." Nothing. Even the background sounds felt muted for a moment, like the forest was holding its breath. I laughed too loud, too forced. Joe muttered something about wildlife being weird, like he was trying to convince himself more than us. We started talking again, deliberately. Classes, stupid stories, anything to force normalcy back into place. Then we went quiet again. The footsteps resumed. Joe turned on his headlamp and swept the trees. The moment the light hit the forest, the footsteps stopped. He kept the beam steady. Nothing. Just trunks, brush, reflective leaves. He lowered the light. The footsteps came back. That's when I said, "Okay, that's not random." Caleb tried to joke. "Maybe it's a deer messing with us." Joe didn't laugh. "Deer don't stop walking when you talk." So we tested it. Light unseen. Light off footsteps. Again and again. Then it started sounding like the steps were shifting position, not getting closer, not moving away, just changing angles around us. At one point, it sounded like it moved from one side of camp to the other far too fast. I know how that sounds. I've replayed it enough times to run through every logical explanation. Sound travels weird in the mountains. Acoustics can lie. But sitting there, it felt like either someone was moving and possibly fast, or it wasn't just one thing. Caleb finally said we should go to bed. Joe didn't move. Caleb nodded, like that was what normal people did in situations like this. And part of me wanted to agree. Crawling into a sleeping bag felt safer than admitting we were scared of something we couldn't see. We argued in whispers, like that somehow kept the situation under control. Joe wanted to pack up and leave immediately. Caleb didn't want to hike in the dark. None of us wanted to be the one who overreacted. Then a branch snapped close, just inside the edge of the light. Joe whipped his headlamp toward the sound. The beam shook across trees, but found nothing. Just empty forest. Caleb stood up and shouted, "Hey, we see you. Knock it off." Silence. Then one footstep. Just one. Joe didn't hesitate. "Car?" He said it like the decision had already been made. We packed fast and sloppy. Stuff went into bags half-sipped. Tent stakes got yanked out and bent. No one cared anymore. And the moment we started breaking camp, the footsteps stopped like that was the outcome it wanted. We didn't run. We moved fast but careful. Running in the dark would have made everything worse. Headlamps bounced as we hiked, shadows jumping everywhere. When we reached the car, we piled in. Doors slammed harder than intended. Caleb locked his door twice. Joe started the engine immediately. We sat there with the headlights blasting into the trees, pretending it was funny. Caleb finally said, "Okay, not an elk." Joe joked about forest spirits. I laughed, because not laughing felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to name. We slept in the car, or tried to. Someone kept waking up to check the windows. In the morning, we drove back up to grab what we'd left behind. Daylight was supposed to prove we'd been dramatic. The campsite looked exactly the same. Then Joe pointed at the ground near the fire ring. Footprints, not ours. Different tread. Bigger boots, and they weren't random. They curved around where we'd been sitting. We stood there silently. No one wanted to say it out loud. On the drive home, Caleb tried to turn it into a story. Said maybe the footsteps weren't there to scare us. Maybe they were there to make sure we didn't stay.